Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control.
What is up on this snowy day? We are recording on Sunday. We have some snow on the ground, and it's feeling okay. How do you feel driving in the snow?
I love the snow.
Yeah,
I'm a cold weather person at heart.
It blows my mind because you're from Florida.
Yeah, I mean this is basically shorts weather for me still. I'm a big fan, so I'm excited to relive the glory days of Snowpocalypse 2015. Hopefully we get some snow that sticks on the ground and makes for some good sledding or snow angels, or I don't know. But I'm a fan of it. I'm excited. It's been 6 years in the making.
Yeah, and shout out to Coffee Folk for still being open in the truck, making it happen. We got some Coffee Folk in the house, so that was cool. Support your businesses that are opening still during this time, even though the weather might be a little bad the next couple days. But let's get into it. We have a ton to talk about as Georgia feels like 48 days ago. So there's a ton to talk about. Jimmy, how are you feeling overall? We can take in so many directions.
Yeah, I mean, what a week. Last week were speculating on what was going to happen with Betsy Price's news conference. Yep. I mean, that feels like a literal eternity ago.
Yeah.
That was Monday. Tuesday was Georgia. Wednesday, people tried to overthrow the government. Man, what a week.
I mean, and then what? Then Thursday, they finally finish the approval of the electoral
like
college
3
stuff.
in the morning.
Yeah. But then the banning of Trump was Friday. I mean, it was a full week.
Yeah.
And now we're also identifying some of these people who were in the building, like Mr. Burnett, the guy, the 60-year-old guy who got arrested for being in Nancy Pelosi's office with his feet up.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, a lot is going on. I don't know how you're feeling.
Everyone on Parler is accusing all of their friends of being like undercover Antifa. They don't even know what Antifa means.
Oh, that's the most frustrating part about Antifa. It's like, I don't know how you can get the data set on that, but it'd be amazing if you could have surveyed 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 1,000 Americans with 2 questions. The first question was 10 years ago. Do you know what the Ku Klux Klan is? Yes or no? 9 out of 10 would say yes.
I hope more. Yeah. I really hope more.
Well, I was just thinking, like, I don't know. We have a very diverse group of people. So some people may not know about, American history like that. Like, I don't know. Like, it could be possible. But then that same survey, the second question is, do you know what Antifa is? What is the answer? 1 out of 10? Like, yeah. So now some dude, Donald J. Trump, comes out and tweets. By the way, he brings them up and shuts them down during George Floyd and all that stuff.
Yeah.
He then goes and blames or attacks, this Antifa stuff. That gets blown up. Now everybody knows about Antifa. Like it's Osama bin Laden up in here who's running this thing. Yeah. But it's domestic. And it's like, guys, the guy's making things up for you, man.
Yeah. Well, my favorite, thread of memes this week has been the, we're announcing that we're planning a big insurrection January 6th. Trump is inviting us all here. He's encouraging us. We did it. It was Antifa that did it. No, you literally said you made T-shirts. You all made matching T-shirts and went and wore them inside.
Yeah, it was. It's been a day, and I think we should. Even what's crazy is looking at the local politicians who supported. I mean, how can you stand up and still play along with this after being locked down in your offices? Yeah, after being under desks. Yeah. And then coming out and be like, yeah, I'm still going to fight for voter fraud. Yeah. Like you are a dark, twisted animal for feeling like that is what you need to do.
Yeah. And when we're talking about local politicians, Ron Wright, who is a congressman in Arlington, but more I would say what's getting more press around Fort Worth is, what's his name?
Roger Williams.
Yeah, Roger Williams, who serves on the Board of Trustees for TCU, is a congressman, and honestly, he stands for everything that TCU doesn't stand for, which if you're not super familiar with the school, although it is Texas Christian University, they have tried very hard over the past 10 to 15 years to further distance themselves from being a religiously affiliated university to fostering openness, diversity. They've failed in a lot of ways on that, but that's their mission and where they point towards. And so to be represented by a guy who continues to push this unsubstantiated voter fraud, continues to push and back someone who is a racist, a rapist, just a terrible person. Like, clearly those two things don't align. The chancellor has also donated a good sum of money to his political campaigns. And so that's sort of gotten some headlines this week is, how does TCU continue to allow this man to represent the university when he doesn't represent what the university wants to stand for?
Yeah, what they're trying to become. Because I think that's the tough part with TCU. I mean, it's a private school. The diversity is, in their professors and their students is very disproportionate to America, to Texas, to Fort Worth as a whole. I mean, they're one of those universities who's trying to stop becoming a country club university and being a city university. And honestly, Fort Worth needs them to do that, because in order to be a metro hub where people want to be, you kind of have to have, these, Austin has UT, the Bay has Stanford. Like, you have to have a national strong university. So I want TCU to lead up to that, but that is the big twist that I think is happening, and we'll see what happens. I doubt that they actually remove him unless like the kids start doing something and the professors.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
because they didn't even make the front of the paper. It was like you had to get to like page 4 or something to get to it.
and I feel like a lot of students and professors stepped up over the summer to push TCU to do more and say more and be better about diversity on campus. And I don't know that it was really met with a ton of change.
Yeah.
And that makes me think that this will sort of like slide by the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think even like look at how, I mean, speaking of sliding by the same way, I mean, look at how this whole situation, how did you slide by into the Capitol building?
Yeah.
How effortlessly. I mean, I think about looking back at when we had Black Lives Matter protests on the bridge and we had police in straight up SWAT gear.
Yeah.
We were ready to go down. We had tear gas. We arrested 50 people.
Yeah.
Just from a city protest.
Yeah.
We looked more equipped.
A peaceful, unarmed city protest.
Yeah. We looked more equipped, I mean, right there to handle that than people coming into one of the top 5 most important buildings of our country. Yeah. What happened there? What is
yeah, and I mean, it's not like we didn't know about it. Like, I mean, there's more and more information coming out about like they told contractors and people that would be doing maintenance work not to come on the 6th because they knew what was going to happen. There was calls for the National Guard pretty quickly after the intrusion and invasion started that were ignored. And it wasn't until like 4 or 5 hours later that the National Guard was actually deployed. There's a lot of rumors about people being in the crowd who are like state representatives or actual representatives of this country that were leading that charge. And so I know how we weren't prepared, and that's because it was a bunch of white people out there rioting. And we've seen a lot of videos of like gates just opening, whatnot. There's been back and forth about how that is a tactic. If it's like one person against 5,000, like you're not like don't stand there. Like get back to reinforcements. But I mean, the videos of cops taking selfies of, I mean, there's there in a New York Times article, one of the people said they asked a cop where someone's office was, and they tried to point him that direction. They're clearly like a lot of the cops were in on this, which makes sense. 80% of police officers vote red. And I'm sure a lot of them shared the beliefs of everything that was going on. I mean, it's not a realization of where this country is, because we know how racist this country is.
But I think it goes with, I mean, I think what it just shows with like what LeBron James even said is we just live in two Americas, and that is like so true. And I mean, even going back to like the local city, you know, Betsy Price had a good kind of quote about that in a recent press conference around like the next mayor really needs to understand, like, you need to, like, if you invest too much on the suburbs and the growing suburbs, you lose yourself and your identity of your city from the inside. And that's the city limits where it's more diversity, more of this. And it is two worlds. Even in Fort Worth, I always say like Fort Worth is a small micro of the national dynamics, right? Like you can live in New York, you can live in California, in these cities, and feel like, oh, everyone's like this. But we're like New York City and, you know, Wyoming hanging out next to each other. And which makes it special. But that to me is like, we live in these two worlds. And that's what's tough is these aren't just terrorists, there were terrorists, but there were actually our neighbors there. Our neighbors who walk in the same grocery store.
And we've seen as our
parents,
we're learning more and more about the identities of a lot of these people. There's a North Texas realtor who, with a few other people, took a private plane out there, said it was the best day of her life. I saw a girl who I went to college with on her Instagram stories talking about how disappointed she was that she couldn't be there with them and like rally with these proud patriots. Like, these patriots are for the Confederacy. Like, that's why they're carrying Confederate flags around. They're not American patriots. But yeah, these are our peers, especially in a city where the difference between blue and red in the most recent election was like a couple thousand votes. It's such a tough thing to process and grapple with, of how do you engage in a way that is non-inflammatory when there need to be consequences for people who continue to support this administration and the people who try to kill people because of the color of their skin. Like, there shouldn't be any tolerance there. There shouldn't be any calls for peace. It should be there needs to be consequences, and then how do we move forward?
And the part that really was big too is just like, this is when you know how, I don't know, I was trying to give some Republicans the benefit of the doubt. I was like, okay, maybe people are waking up now. Maybe they're realizing, Mitt Romney was onto something. Like, I don't know. Like, I try to say, I don't know who's the Mitch McConnell of the Democratic side, like someone who's that powerful, and when they talk, your brain changes and you believe them, because that man talked, and he, for his 1% of heart of his 30 plus years of doing his thing, I was like inspired as someone watching it. And I was like, this your boy. This is like, if you had a Mount Rushmore of conservatism, like he's on it. This is your dude. He's telling you The election is over. He's telling you that the Department of Homeland Security had 2 committees that said this was a fair election. And you still, like, I don't know, like, that would, to me and you, like, a President Obama was like, yeah, guys, I am worried about Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Brain. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Now I am too. You're right.
Well, and but the problem is that people that idolized Mitch McConnell also idolized Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley. Like, there are these other Mount Rushmores of people, or future Mount Rushmores of Republicans, or I don't even want to call them Republicans.
Yeah.
Because I think that's insulting to, like, actual, like, conservatives in the country.
Yeah. Because there were some conservatives who, and I don't know if this is the right way to look at it, but I guess if Republicans increase in the House, but Donald Trump lost, you could argue that there were some Republicans who said, I'm still going to vote conservative, but I'm not voting for Donald Trump. Did you look at it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, but as long as people like Ted Cruz continue to spew crap out of their mouth about this being unfair and we shouldn't try impeachment, like, that's inflammatory. Like, what you're saying is, I don't want to face consequences for my actions.
Yeah.
And generally, not even generally, I've said it on here before, white people have never faced the consequences of their actions before.
Yeah.
And that means that white people assume that they can do whatever they want and not get punished. And I mean, this week we saw pictures floating of Kyle Rittenhouse in a bar with his mom outside of the state and county that he lives in, like, should have been violating bail. And they're like, no, like, he's good. Like, just hanging out.
Yeah.
He murdered people.
Yeah.
And
there's a 21-year-old girl who was recently getting Nicaila Wright. She tased and robbed a 71-year-old lady. I'm not saying it's right, but she got 17 years for it. 17 years. She's black. All right. Kyle Rittenhouse is having a drink with his mom.
Kyle Rittenhouse is 17 too. He can't even be drinking.
This is the difference. Like,
and
even
that's the same thing.
These guys,
like, with a lot of Hispanics are white passing or like to identify as white. I would say that Ted Cruz probably falls into that category. Like, they don't want to have to face consequences for what they've been doing. And as long as they perpetuate these sort of false things, like, people are going to grasp onto that. And anyone who turns against them, like, instantly becomes Antifa, and, like, they're trying to hang Mike Pence.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't like a fake thing. Like, they were walking around
homophobic Mike Pence.
They're trying, like, they were trying to hang Mike Pence.
Electroshock therapy Mike Pence.
Because he would not overturn the election with power that he doesn't have.
Yeah.
But that's what they're going to do.
So where do we go from here, though? Where do you, right, you have Roger Williams over here standing up against it. You had 137, you said, other House.
It was something like 145.
Other people stood up for this, that we voted for. This is why your local elections are important. Your local people are important. But then, as well as now you have this whole social media thing going on, where you have Twitter banning Trump, Parler. For those who may not know, the Parler is kind of a right-wing Twitter place where people go when they feel like all these other social media places are blocking them. They're hosting stopped by Amazon where they're doing their web services. They also are getting blocked from being downloaded on the App Store or the Google App Store. So all this is happening. And so where do we go from here? What is your, let's say it slows down. Where do we go from here?
There has to be repercussions for what has happened, not just for the people inside the Capitol, but for all of the elected officials who have been perpetuating this and encouraging it. There's a constitutional amendment that says that if you were part of an insurrection or committing treason, like, you cannot serve in Congress. So Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, the other few people in the Senate, all 145 losers in the House, like, they all need to be removed from office, which, what's her name? Brand new senator from Missouri. Is it Rashida Bush? She is introducing legislation to try and do that. Impeachment has to happen, which should be coming in the House on Monday. 12 Republican senators in the Senate will need to flip, which should happen. There has to be repercussions, and then we can move forward and figure out what's next. Like, we can't continue to allow people, especially white people, to do this kind of stuff without any sort of punishment, because that just makes them think that they can continue doing these things. And until there is a stop put to that, then these things are just going to continue happening. We already know they're planning something for the 17th, both at the U.S. Capitol and at nationwide state capitals. So that could be something we see happen even more so than it did on Wednesday in Austin on the 17th. But as far as like social media companies go, I mean, these are private companies. Like, they have terms and conditions. If you violate them, you don't get to use their platform. In the case of Amazon Web Services, I'm sure it's the same way that they violated terms and conditions. But if you're a company, you don't want to be the one hosting Parler right now. Like, that's how does your brand overcome that? Yeah. So, like, I think these companies are obviously completely within their rights to do this, and saying that it violates your free speech, like, you're just mad that there are consequences to trying to overthrow the U.S. government. Yeah.
I love how what Mark Cuban said to Holly about the book. Yeah. That was good. He was like, I know I'll mess it up, but he's just talking about, you remember, no shirt, no shoes, no service. Mm-hmm. Well,
no morals,
no principle, no book.
Yeah.
You know, you can self-publish. Yeah. It's, again, what's tough about this is over 74 million people voted for Donald Trump. That's over 46% of voters. Mm-hmm. That is people I love. It's not just neighbors.
Yeah.
It is best friends. It is parents. It is people. And then you see that Trump has a 90% approval rating from Republicans. You know, George Bush was like, on his last end of his election was 68%.
Yeah.
So, and then over, you know, majority of them still feel like the election was rigged after so much auditing.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what I like what Mitch said. There was other elections, 2004, another, I think maybe it was 2016.
Yeah.
And then he said one in the 70s that were closer than this one. And I think that's just like, I don't know. I just think that the Donald is I don't know if it's fake power and it's the vanity, or is it real power? Because people are afraid of him. People are afraid of a tweet, which you can no longer really be afraid of. If that was what's holding you back from stepping up and away from him, well, he can't tweet anymore.
Yeah.
So now actually stand up for your constituents. I don't know.
Yeah. But like we said, 74 million people voted for him. So their constituents are advocating for this.
Do you see, I remember, I think it was you when we were having this conversation that you think the Lincoln Project might start a party. Was that you that told me that?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that's like what they would prioritize.
Yeah.
Because it seems like their thing is just kind of like making fun of people who
are Trumpism.
Yeah. But there are like the Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, like she's saying that she's going to thinking about leaving the Republican Party. All these people need a landing spot somewhere. And I would say probably moderate Dems also maybe would like a landing spot away from Bernie Sanders or AOC. But
I feel like a lot of that group actually feels they need a landing spot out of the Democratic Party because it's still the old guard.
Yeah. So it's like where do these people feel like they need to land somewhere, and the Lincoln Project has sort of shown that they could gather a following. Like they need something to rally around. So I don't know. Maybe these people do come together and try to form a new party for all of the like, we need a 3-party system people. Like maybe that's a positive thing. It's just another one of those things of acting like that's going to fix America's problems is pretty naive. And just wrong. So I don't know, that could be interesting to see if they would view 2024 as a time to work towards that. It's so hard to say what the way forward's going to be. And that's the conversation we were having is what's next. And I don't know. I mean, immediately what's next is that both Democrats won Georgia. Democrats control the House, Senate, and presidency, which thank you, Trump, for truly making America great again. So that's it. I think that these next 2 years have a lot of what do we want the future of the country to look like? Because at least for right now, we control the power to dictate that. So will there actually be follow through? Like, will we actually accomplish a lot of what is seen as radical, but is really just like basic human rights of healthcare, education, providing just like equal access for POC. I don't know. I mean, that's the exciting thing about these next 2 years is that we actually have the power to dictate what we want and make a future for America that is better than what we saw on January 6th and better than we've seen ever in American history.
Yeah. Well, talking about kind of next, I know local elections are around the corner for everyone. And so I think let's talk about kind of the evolution of post Betsy Price as we have our mayoral election. We're starting to see some of our candidates come out and talk about running. We know Deborah Peoples looks to run. Brian Byrd is looking to run. And then the potential of Ann Zadeh is looking to also run Tarrant County council members. So, I mean, what is your thoughts on, I guess, comments on how you think of Betsy Price's legacy, and then what do you see the future of where it needs to go?
It'll obviously be interesting. So I think the only two confirmed candidates we have are Peoples and Byrd. Zadeh put out a message right after Betsy's press conference that if you read it, you would have thought, oh, she's running for mayor. But then an hour later, she was like, I'm not actually running for mayor. I'm just saying I'm prepared to be mayor. There was a lawyer who is more Republican who people thought he was starting to fundraise, but he announced he wasn't. Ramon Romero has said that he hasn't counted it out. If a lot of these people run, that's even more council seats that are going to be open. And I think it's been since like 2014 that we haven't had a new council member. So again, like nationally, Fort Worth gets to dictate its future in 2021 based on who it elects to the two new council seats and the ones that need to be filled by anybody who runs for other office. Yeah. So I really think that we need to invest heavily in making sure that council seats reflect the population of the city by becoming significantly more diverse than we have been. I really hope that mayor is somebody who values those same sorts of things. I think Peoples and Romero both could fill that really well. I think the knock against Zadeh is that she represents District 9, which is generally like blue bonnet circle area. Mm-hmm. And so what has she advocated for? She's advocated for those people. And that population is generally fairly white. Yeah. I think she's done a good job in other areas, but I think that's a knock against her. As far as Betsy's legacy, I think it was Romero said that Fort Worth wouldn't, something to the extent of Fort Worth wouldn't be where it is now without Mayor Price, but she hasn't represented everyone in the city. Yeah. And so I think that should be our priority, is how do we get someone in office who will represent the interests of the people who have not been at the forefront of representation over Betsy Price's term.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, for me, I think I do have I do have an appreciation and love for Betsy Price and the work she did over her 5 terms as mayor. And I can't imagine, though, especially during this time as well, even though she didn't do a good job representing everyone, maybe in responding to BLM, and then her very, I would argue, silent, if you weren't paying attention, but proactive initiative to get that police bill passed. Mm-hmm. But I can't imagine, because I know there's some rich, crazy wackadoos in her ear. I can't imagine who are like, would, you know, for her being the largest metropolitan area that has a Republican mayor, she could have gone off the rocker. Yeah. She could have gone Paxton. She could have gone Cruz, and she didn't. And so I think, even though we didn't feel like she came far enough over to understand everyone in the city, we will never know, but I bet she did a lot of defending of that.
Absolutely. And that's where Bird sort of falls from what I've read about him, is that, it would be, you know, electing a Ken Paxton, Ted Cruz, Governor Abbott. So that's definitely not what the city needs. That's not how you continue to capitalize on the growth that the city has seen. Yeah. That's not how you become a welcoming community. Yeah. So, I agree with you. I think that Betsy Price in general will be remembered very fondly as a mayor of Fort Worth who helped put the city on track towards really exponential growth and not just becoming the bedroom city for Dallas. But now that we are on that growth, how do we elect somebody who continues that and it does so in a way that capitalizes on the beautiful diversity of the city? Yeah. And that's where, you know, I mean, obviously we will be voting, you know, whoever's on the Democratic side, especially in Tarrant County politics. I don't know. I think I like Romero simply because he's a little younger. He's a winning politician, where he has. I already feel like his branding and his mobilization team naturally, based off where you've kind of seen his signs, but then also his messaging and his brand, it just seems like he can look legitimate and look, that's my only worry with Deborah based off of the past election against Betsy. She was, I know, super underfunded compared to her, but she probably
won't be the case this time around. I mean, maybe. I mean, if Democrats vote pit money in how we've been pitting into national elections, she'll have more money. But I don't feel like her mobilization team has shown that it has been that strong. And then I'm also kind of a fan of, the average age of a Fort Worthian is 40s, in their early 40s, but our voting age is in their 60s, which, that's where I think is a plus for Deborah if that kind of stays the same. But can she excite the young voters she's going to need to win? But I also think her ability to do the Black Lives Matter thing on the street and get that showcase, bring us nationally. That's the first time that Fort Worth wasn't national for being hillbillies and racists.
Yeah.
So I really respect her movement in doing that. So I don't know.
Yeah. Deborah's already on. She's on Act Blue.
That's
if you are looking to donate, the mayor and all city council positions in Fort Worth are nonpartisan. However, because Mrs. Peoples is the chair of the Tarrant County Democratic Party, I've already found her on Act Blue. I don't know what the plan is for other people running. I really don't know a ton about Romero. He's somebody I'll have to do some research into. But it's worth acknowledging that Deborah Peoples is essentially Fort Worth's Stacey Abrams.
Yeah.
Like, she has been on the ground making a ton happen over the last however many years to see Tarrant County turn blue. And you can say, it's just because younger people have been moving here, blah, blah, blah. But we saw with this election how high turnout was in Tarrant County, in a place that typically has some of the lowest voter turnout for large cities in the country. And that doesn't just happen by happenstance.
Yeah.
And so I think that she knows the city incredibly well.
Yeah.
She knows the underserved communities in the city incredibly well because of all the work that she has done. And I think that, in my opinion, I would say she's the front runner at this point.
Oh yeah. Big time.
And we'll see what Bird can organize to try and combat that, or if somebody more moderate, more in the vein of Betsy Price is going to step up to really try and challenge her.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think she's been a roll up your sleeves. This is what I do for Fort Worth, and that's awesome. I think I just think I'm thinking more of, 35% of Fort Worth is Hispanic, right? I think Stacey Abrams activated a lot of people, but, Atlanta, the history in Georgia, being able to get other successful Black women and, churches and communities to advocate together. Fort Worth is going to need a POC campaign with, and that's the part where I see who, especially when you're looking at Latino voters nationally, edging conservative.
Yeah.
So that's where I see the power in having, I could see the excitement coming from a Latino representative. But again, I am a win-win regardless. I just think it's going to be fun. And I think, people respect Deborah already so much that I think people might be like, no, let's make this your moment and let's highlight this. Yeah. So, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. You want to go to wins and losses?
Yeah, let's do it. Cool. Go for it. Go for a win.
So I think a win is Governor Abbott is here on Monday, we record on Sunday, but if obviously we post on Monday. So I'm telling you today, he's here at Arlington looking at the esports, how they have been able to render vaccinations to people at scale. And they have been pressed in our Tarrant County's model to do that, and how we've been able to do that. So he's here to just get ideas and change Texas' approach on how do we scale delivering vaccinations to people. And I think that's kind of a win for Tarrant County and Arlington. And I also think as we get more vaccinations in Texas, they're looking to give them to places that can distribute 100,000 vaccinations. And so the fact that they're come to Arlington as a place to do that, I think that's awesome. We quietly, as much as I feel like Fort Worth has felt like the stepchild to Dallas, it's funny how much Arlington has been really involved at a national scale as these stadiums are there. These big areas are there. So I think that's interesting, but I say that's a win.
Yeah. There's a headline in the Star Telegram a couple days ago that read something to the effect of taxpayers helped pay for Cowboy Stadium. Why are we standing in the rain to get vaccines? Mm-hmm. And I think this is the piece of that Abbott, Texas, nationally, we're trying to figure out is how do we mobilize these large area spaces safely to really start cranking through getting people vaccinated. Because we have a lot of unused vaccine out there, and we can't let it go bad, but we've obviously failed at putting it into place on a national and statewide scale. And so that is cool that Arlington is being highlighted for that. And I don't know, hopefully maybe Dickey's Arena. Like, yeah. we have big spaces, like let's make use of them and get people poked.
Yeah. What is you got a win, or you want me to go a loss?
I would say that my win, I don't know, maybe it's just a small thing, but like Kay Granger not hopping on to back the insurrection or the contesting of the Electoral College.
Yeah.
Like, she's been against it really. I mean, she had a quote in like early December saying like it's time to move on. And so I really appreciate that, because there are other obviously local officials who have not done that. And so I would say that's a win that she's continued to stand firm in that and represent facts and truth over any sort of like political game that could come from hitching your wagon to these people.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think that's to me, like, is like, I want to be I before Donald Trump, I considered myself an independent, someone who's not afraid to vote either way. But it's crazy how progressive and liberal, and I know people who listen to our show who maybe aren't our age or our family or our parents be like, man, these hippie dippies over here are, super progressive. But I feel like me and you weren't like that pre-Donald Trump. Yeah. Right? We were, and I feel like someone like Granger is a good like sign of like, these are type of people. Like, imagine if she was leading, the face of Republican politics.
I would much rather have her represent Texas than Ted Cruz. Oh, and so I'm glad that like she at least represents Fort Worth.
Exactly. But no, so going into my loss is the potential of cutting of school funding because of when we have recessions, we cut school funding. 2011, we cut $4 billion in funding across the country, and it really impacts pre-K and being able to offer public pre-K full day, all day, like a whole work day of education. So Texas has always been not one of the best at staying consistent and providing high quality pre-K education. And so that is coming up for discussion on the budget line. And so if you're someone who believes in public pre-K education, make sure you kind of hear where support is, what's going on in the local community to support that, and also realize a lot of the education officials are also up for seats at this upcoming local election. And so seeing how that plays out will also be important. So I think my loss is that education just usually gets the back end of a bad recession. Yeah. I hope we don't.
Yeah. My loss, probably back in like September, October-ish, we highlighted the Funky Town Fridge as they were getting started. They have run into some issues with code compliance. That is just, I mean, it's really frustrating to hear because these are people like doing their due diligence, trying to provide a good service to the community. I mean, really quickly, they've popped up 3 fridges in the city, in places that really need it. And it is, it's frustrating to hear code compliance, like just not try to be flexible on how to make this work. They posted a live video on Instagram this past week. It's about 25 minutes, but I would encourage you to go check it out and watch it, and really just highlights where they're at in the process. I will say that Code Compliance has sat down with them and really walked them through what they thought would fit them best, which is not something I've known Code Compliance to do. They're generally very black and white. And so that I would say is at least a positive, but they're trying to, I think, push them towards getting like a grocery store permit and having the sort of maintenance and code that goes along with that, which is fairly expensive especially for a smaller like community funded operation, and just takes a lot of time and effort. And I one thing that they said in the video was that like law and code always follows behind innovation. And essentially, I think this might be something that we talk about citywide at some point is what are some old laws in Fort Worth that hamper positive innovation for the city right now? And I think this is an example of that, where they're trying to do something good for the community. It's very obvious that that's what they're doing. We don't need to be slapping them with a ton of financial burden around permitting and extra maintenance, etc. When they are maintaining their fridges, they're maintaining their spaces. They're not just dumping these things and letting them rot. Like, they take a lot of pride in what they're doing. So I think that
and there's a need. I mean, the food lines are getting longer. I mean, the Tarrant County Food Bank down the street from us, I mean, that bad boy is, I mean, it is long.
Yeah, and food flies off the fridge's shelves. Like, they're constantly having to restock. Like, the need is there. We have people trying to step into that need, and we have code compliance people coming out and saying, you've got 30 days to get this right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's worth highlighting. It's worth looking into how can you help support them in this process. And it's worth pushing your elected officials on, hey, these are archaic rules. We need to figure out new positive ways that surround something like a food bank. Because it's not a grocery store. It's not Tom Thumb. It's not Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Like, they are trying to get food to the communities that need it. And they shouldn't be having to spend all of their time, effort, energy, money on silly things that don't help them accomplish their purpose. So it's great that Code Compliance is trying to work with them. But it just seems like a waste of their resources that they could be putting into continuing to help people.
I love it. Well, that's what we have today, people. A lot happened since last Monday, and hopefully you're finding peace on this snowy, ugly weather couple days. And thank you for listening to the 817 podcast. We have a lot of upcoming guests and ideas to make 2021 a bigger year for us to really launch and continue to be successful. I don't even know what number we're on. I was like,
I don't know. I started labeling them as season 2 now that it's 2021. So
there you go.
Who knows?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening, and look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Dopamine swipe, follow us like double tap. Now they control your life, control your life.